What if I told you that everything you think you know about male desire is completely wrong? Most women believe that men's sexual energy is purely physical, purely instinctual, something primal that just needs release and nothing more. But here's the truth that will change everything. Sexual desire in men isn't just about the act itself. It's about validation, identity, emotional safety, and deep longing. What he truly wants isn't just sex. It's what sex represents to him. And when you understand how to read into those representations, you can begin to channel his sexual energy in a way that binds him to you emotionally, not just physically. This isn't about manipulation or games. This is about understanding the deeper psychology of masculine desire and learning how to create a connection so profound that you become absolutely unforgettable. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some women can make men completely obsessed, while others are quickly forgotten. And more importantly, you'll know exactly how to become the woman he can't stop thinking about. The hidden truth about male vulnerability. Here's something most people don't realize. For many men, the bedroom is one of the few spaces where they feel allowed to be vulnerable. It's where they don't have to perform strength, don't have to protect, don't have to posture. In moments of intimacy, they finally exhale. When they touch you, it's not just because they want to feel you. It's because it's one of the few ways they know how to express need. This is powerful information, but it's also dangerous because if you don't understand what's happening beneath the surface, it just becomes sex. And if it's just sex, it can happen with anyone. But when you see his physical desire as a door, an entry point into his emotional wiring, you begin to change the entire game. You start responding not just to his body, but to his deeper craving for connection, for validation, for identity. When you take his desire and respond not only with your body, but with attention, presence, and psychological reflection, you create a feedback loop that teaches him something revolutionary. Being close to you isn't just arousing, it's healing. Think about this carefully. Most men go through life never experiencing this kind of depth in their intimate connections. They're used to physical release without emotional recognition. They're used to being wanted for what they can provide rather than being seen for who they truly are. When you become the woman who offers both physical and emotional intimacy, you become irreplaceable. The art of post-intimacy connection. Here's how this works in practice. And this is where most women miss the opportunity entirely. After a moment of intimacy, instead of pulling away or falling into silence, you lean in, but not physically. You lean in emotionally. You might ask something like, "What did that mean for you?" Or reflect something tender like, "You seem different just now," softer. These aren't tricks or manipulative tactics. They are genuine invitations. You're inviting him into a space where intimacy is no longer about performance, it's about being truly seen. Most men never get this kind of emotional recognition. When you offer it, even subtly, it becomes unforgettable. And here's the paradox that will surprise you. The more you slow things down, the more obsessed he becomes. Because obsession isn't about frequency, it's about meaning. He'll keep returning to the source of his own emotional awakening. He'll start associating pleasure not just with physical release, but with you, with your words, your presence, your energy. But here's where it requires real maturity and awareness on your part. You must be grounded enough to hold that space. You cannot play the role of mother or therapist, but you can be a mirror that reflects his emotional experience back to him in moments when he least expects it. The bedroom isn't the place where the connection ends, it's where it begins. So when you touch him, when you respond to him, when you let him into your physical space, do it with the understanding that this is not just biology. This is psychology. This is philosophy. He's not just seeking your body, he's seeking himself through your gaze, your breath, your emotional responsiveness. The psychology of anticipation over satisfaction. Now let's talk about something that goes against everything you've been taught. Most women have been conditioned to believe that giving more of themselves, more attention, more affection, more availability will deepen a man's interest. But when it comes to sexual energy, more is not always more. In fact, the power of sexual influence lies not in availability, but in restraint. Obsession is born not from satisfaction, but from anticipation. Sexual tension is a psychological space that is not defined by what happens, but by what almost happens. And that space between desire and fulfillment is where emotional and erotic obsession is cultivated. It's where fantasy builds. It's where the mind loops. It's where longing becomes a story. Here's the truth most people ignore. If you give everything away too soon, you collapse that space. You flatten the mystery. You erase the emotional charge that compels a man to stay, to pursue, to want. Desire is sustained not through closeness, but through the interruption of closeness. It is the delay that intensifies the pull. When you know how to create that delay, not through game playing, but through presence and self-possession, you activate the part of his psyche that equates wanting with value. This is not manipulation, this is neuropsychology. The brain attaches more value to what is earned than what is given freely. He has to work for that closeness, emotionally and physically, and in doing so, he convinces himself that you're worth it because he's invested. You don't need to be obvious about it. It's subtle. You make eye contact and then break it first. You lean into a conversation, then let silence linger. You allow him to touch you, and then you take his hand and gently move it away, not as a rejection, but as an invitation to slow down. These are small embodied signals that say, you may want me, but you don't control access to me. That statement, spoken silently through your energy, activates his focus. Suddenly, he's alert. His attention is sharpened. He's in the space of pursuit. The power of feminine energy and polarity. The challenge, of course, is that this requires you to be comfortable with not being the one who gives constantly. You have to resist the urge to over-explain, over-offer, over-perform. It requires you to trust that your presence is enough, that your energy has gravity, that you do not need to prove your value through immediate access. This is where true feminine power lies, not in seduction through exposure, but in seduction through containment. It's not about withholding out of fear or punishment. It's about knowing that you are the container, you are the frame, and the frame gives meaning to what it holds. There's a fundamental polarity in relationships that's often overlooked, one that explains why some connections feel magnetic while others feel flat. That polarity is the dynamic between masculine and feminine energy. And this isn't about gender roles. We're talking about energetic orientation. Masculine energy tends to be directional. It seeks focus, achievement, and release. Feminine energy, in contrast, is receptive, fluid, magnetic. It doesn't chase, it draws in. When a man is in his masculine, he is wired to project outward, to move toward a target, whether that target is success, purpose, or intimacy. What happens when you as a woman stay anchored in your feminine is that you give his energy a place to land. You become the gravitational force he orients around, not because you demand his attention, but because you don't need to. You're grounded, you're self-contained, you're not chasing, fixing, or forcing. And that is disarming to a man who lives in a world that constantly demands he perform. When you return to the feminine by slowing down, listening to your own body, expressing instead of controlling, you create space. And in that space, his desire has room to breathe, to build, to focus itself on you. Creating emotional imprinting through intimacy. This isn't about passivity. Feminine energy is not weak. It's invitational. It's the difference between pulling and allowing, between gripping and holding. When you stop trying to control the pace of connection, when you allow him to come toward you instead of constantly meeting him halfway, he begins to experience his own desire more fully. His sexual energy starts orienting itself toward you, not just in moments of physical intimacy, but in how he thinks, how he plans, how he shows up. This is where things become psychologically rich. When a man begins to associate his own strength, his own erotic drive with your presence, he starts tying his masculinity to the experience of being connected with you. You're not just someone he desires, you're someone who activates a deeper part of him. You reflect back not just arousal, but identity. You are the mirror in which he sees himself as more powerful, more purposeful, more alive. And that reflection is profoundly addictive. But for this to work, you have to stay emotionally rooted. You have to resist the urge to become performative, overly accommodating, or constantly available, because that pulls you out of alignment with your own truth. Feminine energy thrives in authenticity, in being attuned to how you feel moment to moment and expressing that without filtering it to keep the peace or keep him interested. That expression, raw, real, unrehearsed, is what creates polarity. It's what keeps him on edge, leaning in, seeking to know you more deeply. Oh, men, don't obsess over women who make themselves small to fit into a fantasy. They obsess over women who embody a reality so rich, so emotionally textured, that being near them feels like returning to something ancient and familiar, something primal, something human. When you live from your feminine core, when you hold your emotional ground, when you let him come closer instead of reaching for him, his sexual energy stops being aimless. It starts orbiting you, the moment that changes everything. The moment after physical intimacy is often overlooked, but it holds enormous psychological power. It's the window when a man is most emotionally unguarded, when his defenses drop, his nervous system relaxes, and his deeper self becomes momentarily accessible. And yet, this is the exact moment most people slip into silence, distraction, or disconnection. What we miss is that this post-intimate space isn't just recovery time. It's a portal for emotional imprinting. It's when you can begin to redirect his attention from simple gratification toward lasting emotional investment. Men are conditioned, often unconsciously, to separate physical satisfaction from emotional presence. The act becomes mechanical, the connection becomes disposable. This is why so many women feel used even when the encounter was consensual, because what they are often really seeking is not the sex itself, but the meaning behind it, the feeling of being seen, chosen, cared for, not just touched. So how do you begin to rewire that dynamic? You engage his inner world after the outer one has softened. You ask, not in a demanding way, but in an inviting way, about what intimacy means to him, what he felt, what he noticed. These aren't heavy questions. They are openings. They shift the center of gravity from his body to his psyche. You turn the moment inward, you help him reflect, and that reflection creates emotional residue. That residue is what lingers after you leave. It's what makes him feel not just satisfied, but changed by being with you. The secret to becoming unforgettable. This is where your real power lies. Not in what you do for him, but in what he feels about himself when he's around you. When he starts to associate sexual intimacy with deep emotional activation, he stops seeing it as something fleeting and starts seeing it as something significant, anchored, alive. This shift, this redirection, is how obsession is formed, not through performance or seduction, but through meaning. Because let's be honest, sexual chemistry is everywhere. It's not rare. What's rare is an experience that makes a man feel more connected to himself, not just more aroused. When you are the woman who gives him that, when you don't just give him access to your body but invite him to meet his own emotional edge, you become unforgettable. He won't necessarily be able to articulate why. He'll just know that being with you feels different. It feels deeper. It feels like coming home to a version of himself he didn't even know he was missing. But this requires discernment on your part. You must know how to guide that moment without controlling it. You must sense when to speak, when to ask, and when simply to be present, fully, calmly, without expectation. Because presence alone, when it's rooted in emotional attunement, can feel as intimate as words. And sometimes the silence between you after physical closeness can say more than any conversation. It's in that silence, that stillness, that he begins to experience you not as someone he used to feel something for, but as someone he still feels in his body hours or even days later. This is how we begin to redefine intimacy, not as an end, but as a beginning. A doorway into attachment, reflection, deeper connection. It's not about prolonging the act, it's about extending the meaning beyond it, so that when he thinks of you, he doesn't just remember the pleasure. He remembers how real he felt, how emotionally awake he became, how for a moment the world stopped being performative and became deeply, humanly alive. The ultimate truth about obsession. When intimacy becomes emotional revelation and not just release, that's when he stops chasing experiences and starts chasing you. The question isn't how do I keep his attention? The question is, how do I stay in my energy so fully that he can't look away? When you root into your feminine power, when you understand the psychology behind desire, when you learn to create meaning rather than just pleasure, he doesn't just want you, he needs to feel himself through you. This is the difference between women who are easily forgotten and women who become obsessions. It's not about being the most beautiful or the most sexually skilled. It's about being the most emotionally intelligent, the most present, the most authentically feminine. It's about understanding that his sexual energy is not separate from his emotional energy. It's the same force, just expressed differently. And when you learn to work with that force, to channel it, to give it meaning and depth, you become more than just a lover. You become a catalyst for his own emotional awakening. That's the secret. That's the power. That's how you become absolutely unforgettable. Not by trying to be everything to everyone, but by being so deeply rooted in your own feminine essence that being near you becomes a transformative experience. When you master this, you don't just have his attention, you have his devotion. You don't just have his desire, you have his need. And that, ultimately, is what creates lasting obsession. Not the hunger for your body, but the hunger for the feeling of being truly alive that only you can provide.